This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by Brian Welsch, a vice president at National Fuel, a gas-only utility serving more than 700,000 customers in western New York and parts of Pennsylvania. And he's here to talk about energy costs, regulating utilities, and the future of the state's green goals in the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Well, for starters, when you spoke to the legislature back in 2024, you highlighted that your residential customers' annual bills had decreased more than 40% since the late 2000s, largely attributing the decrease to natural gas supplies in the Appalachian region. And I should point out that this was not like with regards to inflation. This was the raw numbers. That's the decrease. Given what we're hearing more broadly these days about utility bills increasing, what has been the experience of your customers since you testified a couple of years ago? Are bills still decreasing, or are you experiencing the same increases as most utilities?
Yeah, well, our customers in Western New York are enjoying the benefits of having, being approximate geographically and also being well connected to those Appalachian supplies in Pennsylvania. And so they continue to reap those benefits of cheap supplies. We have seen, if you look over the last 15 years, we've only increased our delivery rates twice. We've gone in for rate cases in 2016 and more recently in 2023. Cost controls in our DNA. We understand the importance of affordability for our customers. And what we're seeing, in the past couple of years is we're seeing an issue with the supply and demand across the state. So if you look at energy policy over the last 10 years, there really has been no pipelines built that allows new gas supplies to get into the state. And also over that time, we've been increasing the electric grid's reliance on natural gas to power the grid. We closed Indian Point a few years ago. We replaced that a little bit with some wind and solar, but we know that those supplies tend to be intermittent, especially on the coldest days. And so natural gas has filled in that gap. If you look over the last 5 years, we've had a pretty good stretch of warm winters. And so this past winter, where we saw the cold snap at the end of January and February, and you'll normally see, when you have cold weather, you'll see natural gas prices bump up a little bit. But what we saw in terms of the price spikes across the state, both on the natural gas prices and electricity prices, was very atypical. And so we're what we're seeing and what we're hearing is that the reason for rising electric utility rates, rising natural gas utility rates is a natural gas problem.
And that is something that the state's electric grid monitor has highlighted with a recent report where they specifically attributed the rising costs of natural gas to the wholesale energy prices that we've seen, going off the charts lately.
Right. And they're not wrong. That's absolutely happening. But I think what they're missing is the why. Why is that happening? And it's because the state has basically frozen the amount of supplies that they allow into the state while simultaneously increasing demand on the electric grid for that fixed amount of supply. So it's the basic laws of economic supply and demand. When you look at Pennsylvania has the largest supply of natural gas reserves in the continental U.S. If you look at Susquehanna County, Bradford County, Pennsylvania, those are counties that border New York. Those are two of the top 5 producing natural gas counties in the U.S. It's not a supply problem. Producers are producing more and more for less, and what we're seeing is it's really we're unable to get those supplies into New York State to benefit not only gas ratepayers across the state, but also electric ratepayers.
Let's stick with that idea of getting people the fuel that they need. There is movement from state environmental regulators on a new gas pipeline, the Northeast Supply Enhancement Project, which regulators approved with a straight face, saying that it fit with the state's green goals. Are there other fossil fuel-based infrastructure projects that you might have previously thought, boy, we could never get this past regulators, and now, based on this experience, you're saying, maybe we should try this one, or maybe we've got this new idea?
Yeah, there's been a number of projects that were shelved, let's call it 5-10 years ago.
Sure.
And maybe those specific projects don't make sense now, but there is a clear need when you look at the demand that's coming from the electric grid, particularly during peak days. When you look at the need to pair growth in renewables, which we're for, but they're intermittent. So in order to grow renewables, you're going to have to also scale something to back it up. And today, that's natural gas.
But is there anything that you have in mind in particular where you're like, hey, here's a great project that we think deserves a second look now that the environmental regulators have found religion, so to speak?
Yeah, well, certainly the Nessie project, that's one that's already been fast-tracked and approved. We think that makes sense. There's others that I think make sense, too. I'm not here to advocate for a specific pipeline project, but it's clear that not only New York, but New England needs it as well. And you have a critical supply and demand imbalance that needs to be solved.
Well, in terms of the energy costs that ratepayers are paying, the response from the legislature, at least right now, and when I say legislature, I mean the Democratic majorities, is to focus on price controls largely. And specifically, one of the things that they're addressing is this critique that utilities are keeping excess profits, money above and beyond their approved return on equity. The Senate Democrats have approved a measure in their one House budget intended to get all of the money back into the pocket of ratepayers that goes above and beyond that approved return on equity. Are you supportive of closing what these proponents would describe as loopholes, or do you feel like there's a reason why the status quo works and why only a fraction of that money that goes beyond that ROE is actually making it into the pockets of ratepayers?
Yeah, I mean, the rate-making process is complex, and we've been one that's been advocating for transparency on that. So we're supportive of that. It's a robust process that each utility goes through with the Public Service Commission, its staff, numerous stakeholders that are all fighting for different interests. And I think what comes out of those rate cases is a pretty fair outcome. The profits that are set during those rate cases is commonly referred to return on equity. And that's, the way those are set is basically all sides look at, try to figure out what's fair based on what the market would provide. If you look at New York compared to the rest of the country, they're generally in the bottom half of all states in terms of the level that they award.
Although the critique is that there's one thing to have that number that they set, and then there's the sort of de facto return on equity, which is higher in reality than what is the...
Well, that depends on the utility. And
Sure.
I can tell you for National Fuel, we have not earned above our ROE in probably 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
We just, like I said earlier, we filed our first rate case in 2023. Our new rates went into effect in 2025. The authorized ROE that was set in that rate case was 9.7%. And last year, during our first full rate year, we earned 9.6. We did not over-earn.
So it sounds like you guys should be fine with what the Senate Democrats are proposing.
I think it sets a dangerous precedent because when you go through a rate case, it's based on projections. All right, and there's a lot of things that happen in the rate case that are put in place to protect ratepayers, to the point where there's asymmetric risk on the utility in being able to actually achieve that ROE. The current system is from the PSC is they set the ROE and then they say, okay, if you do over earn for whatever reason, there's an earnings sharing mechanism that kicks in. Mm-hmm. We view that sharing mechanism as a healthy thing to incent utilities over the long term to try to keep costs low. And I think taking that away, that incentive, given all of the other protections that are in place that really work against utilities, I think that's a dangerous precedent to set over the long term.
Well, sticking with the Public Service Commission, they're in the midst of a proceeding that is evaluating elements of that Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and there are parts of it that they theoretically have the authority to affect and how it's going to be rolled out. How would you like to see them use that authority with regards to the implementation of the CLCPA? Is there anything specific that you'd like to see them do within their purview?
Yeah. Well, I think we agree with the basis of the petition that was filed by the Coalition for Safe and Reliable Energy. It was...
Who wouldn't? Safe and reliable energy. That sounds great.
Yeah. Well, it was 33 parties. Two of them, one includes Donna DeCarolis, the former president of National Fuel, Dennis Elsenbeck, who was also served on the Climate Action Council, and then 31 other parties across the state. It was a diverse set. Under the climate law, the PSC has the authority. They can invoke their authority under the public service law to revisit and temporarily suspend or modify the renewable power goals so the 70 by 30, 100% by 2040.
And that's 70% renewable by 2030?
Renewable power by 2030. With the PSC, so we think, given that the state energy plan acknowledged that we're not going to hit that goal to 2038 at the earliest, I think it stands to reason that we should revisit the 2030 goal because we know we're not going to hit that.
And why is that the right response as opposed to saying, okay, if we're not going to hit it based on the trajectory we're on now, well, let's double down on it. That's like me saying, Dave, it doesn't look like you're going to have a six-pack by beach season because of the ice cream you had last night. Theoretically, I could say, okay, well, let's start working out, Dave. Let's start, cutting down on your ice cream consumption.
Right. Well, yes, you can start your workouts now and hopefully get halfway there.
I'm glad you believe in my future beach body, Brian. Thank you for that.
But I think we're not saying that we need to stop our development of renewables. Certainly there's headwinds at the federal level that where the state's having issues with that.
They don't like offshore wind. I get the impression
they don't. But I think we should continue to develop as best we can. But I think the pace that's required to hit the 70 by 30 goal is just not achievable. Where I think the tie-in is, and this goes back to what what we think the legislature is entertaining, is you can't really decouple that goal from the greenhouse gas emissions goal of reducing 40% by 2030. And there's lawsuits, there's efforts to implement various programs like cap and invest in order to hit the 2030 goal. Mm-hmm. And we saw the NYSERDA memo that talked about the cost that it could potentially take in order to do that. The problem is if you have the greenhouse gas emissions goal and you don't change that, but you change the renewable power goal, and you can't have a clean grid by 2030, you don't have anything to convert to. The whole point of cap and invest is to incent emissions reductions, and then you need an alternative for folks to convert to avoid the cost of that carbon tax. Right now, the grid's not clean. So if somebody were to electrify their home, the alternative it would be to procure their electricity from the electric grid that's being generated with gas. And that's a way less efficient way to consume gas and would likely increase emissions. So you're actually hurting the climate goals, which I thought is what we're all here to do.
And after a quick break, we'll continue our conversation with Brian Welsch, a vice president at National Fuel, a gas-only utility serving Western New York as well as parts of Pennsylvania. Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're continuing our conversation with Brian Welsch, a vice president at National Fuel, a gas-only utility serving more than 700,000 customers in Western New York and parts of Pennsylvania. And he's here talking about energy costs, utility regulations, and the state's green energy goals. So in terms of the action from the PSC, what would you want to see them do? Is it just about suspending, hitting pause on the timelines, or would you want to see them, if this is something they can do, establish new timelines and say 2030, not realistic. How about 2035?
Yeah, I'm not a renewable power guy, and I don't think.
But some of your best friends probably use renewable power.
Yes, but I think what we want them is to evaluate it and take a hard look at it. There really was never any effort to understand the cost of complying with the Climate Act. So I think what we want to take a step back, evaluate what's necessary. If it's an adjustment of the timelines, then great. If it's something else, but I think what we're asking the PSC, by we, the coalition, is to relook at those goals.
So a few years ago, Governor Hochul attempted to change the methane emissions accounting in the CLCPA, which would have potentially lessened the impact of these emissions and given maybe fossil fuels a longer runway in New York. Ultimately, obviously, the legislature rejected those overtures, but now what's old is new again, and the governor has signaled that she wants to revisit the climate law as part of this budget process. Are you anticipating the accounting issue to be her big push, or is there something else in the law that you think could be amended to address the cost concerns that her administration has raised, like through that NYSERDA memo that you referenced?
Yeah, well, certainly that would be one place to start. I mean, New York, I believe, is the only jurisdiction that has that accounting. The fact of the matter is that the 20-year accounting makes natural gas look really bad, and that's probably why it was put in there. But if you look at other jurisdictions that have a cap and invest program or a carbon tax, they are using 100-foot or the 100-year rule. Sorry,
you got the 100-foot rule on the mind. Yes. You guys temporarily won that one. You guys are good.
So So yeah, I think that's something just to get us on par with the other jurisdictions, particularly if that's where we get to at some point is some sort of cap and trade.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're heading down that route? Do you think this is going to play out kind of like congestion pricing, where the governor initially hits pause on cap and invest, and I don't know, after November we get a version of cap and invest that is maybe scaled back, and the governor says, "Look, I'm great on the environment and saving money for New Yorkers."
It would not save money for New Yorkers.
Save money compared to the original plan.
Okay, if you put it that way, but yeah, any sort of cap and trade program is going to add cost to residents and their heating bills. It's going to add cost to vehicle drivers at the gas pump.
Even if it's rolled out in this brilliant, efficient, and smart way, as climate activists say, and argue that this can be done in an efficient way, and that if targeted rebates are used, that this ultimately can be a cost saver for New Yorkers?
I'm skeptical of it being a cost saver when you look at other jurisdictions that have actually implemented this. So if you look at Washington State, they're about 3 years into their cap and trade program. They're under the 100-year rule of accounting. Their cost, their allowance price per ton of emissions is around $70 today, and it's grown from say 20 when they implemented it back in 2023. That's a significant impact on natural gas users and gas prices in Washington.
So you don't feel like we could come up with a system that ultimately would work and incentivize, say, more energy efficient usages and rebates that are going to cover people's expenses in the short term and maybe long term?
If it's the effort for full electrification, it's likely not to save money.
You feel like it's rooted, solely based on environmental concerns?
Yes.
Gotcha. I want to pivot to another proposal that is in the One House budgets, this one from the Assembly Democrats, dealing with energy costs. And they're backing language that would impose a 2-year moratorium on new rate cases for utilities, or even implementing approved rate increases that would raise gas or electric rates. What would be the practical implications of something like that on utilities, or maybe national fuel specifically?
Yeah, so I think a 2-year moratorium, utilities have the ability to earn a fair return and recover all prudently incurred costs. I think we saw something similar. The national fuel didn't go through this during the pandemic, where rate increases were freezed. Practically what happens is that the utilities could go petition the commission to defer these incremental costs that they're incurring during the present to recover later. And so really what you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road.
Sounds like somebody understands how Albany works.
Yeah. And we saw it with other utilities coming out of the pandemic. Their first rate case that they had coming out of the pandemic, they had a big pricing rate increase
big
request,
sticker shock.
And that's because there was all these deferred costs that had to get caught up and get paid at some point. And I think all you're doing is kicking the can down the road at that point.
And in terms of that experience of ratepayers, we hear a lot right now about people falling months behind on their bills. Has that been your experience with your customers? And do you have a sense of how many are in arrears and are in need of some sort of lifeline?
Yeah, from what I can see, we haven't seen a big uptick in that at the present moment.
Do you think you guys are immune from that because of what we sort of talked about at the start and your ability to control prices?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the lowest rates in the state. And we've got the lowest rates in the Northeast if you look at it on a per MCF delivered basis. Certainly our gas supply charges are much lower than most utilities, particularly the downstate utilities. So the share of wallet or the energy burden for a national fuel customer is around 1.6%. And typically for our low-income programs, we're targeting no more than 3%. So for the median family, their natural gas service is 1.6%. So it's already a very affordable utility service. Certainly this winter we're going to see higher bills. Just people were using more. This is the coldest winter we've seen in a long time. So with that higher usage, bills are going to go up. We also saw price spikes across the state. We do our best to keep those under control. One of the ways we do that as a gas utility is we have access to a significant amount of storage where we'll inject gas that we purchase in the summer, usually at much lower prices. We'll inject that gas, store it, and then we'll withdraw it in the winter. And during those cold spikes where we were seeing, on average during the winter, you might see prices in the $3 to $4 per MCF area. in the basin. We saw in our region prices spike into the $20, $30 area. Downstate, they were much higher. We saw prices in the $150 area. During those times, we'll pull on our storage really hard. I think during that cold stretch, we pulled about 60% of our daily requirements from storage to help offset that price spike.
Well, thinking about where you're located, one of the fuel sources that people have been dying to tap into is that hydrofracking activities. Is that something you guys are interested in exploring? When the governor talks about all of the above, are you like, yes, governor, let's do a real all of the above approach?
Well, I think you see states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, states that are also succeeding on the renewable front, and they are exploring a true all of the above approach. And they recognize that in order to grow renewables, you need something that's going to be abundant and ready on demand when those renewables aren't there. And so, I think the governor is observing what's happening in those states and seeing, okay, that's really what a true all of the above approach is. Their ability to attract business, economic growth, they're just at a more competitive advantage because we're finding folks that are coming into New York and looking to set up a business. Maybe it's a data center, advanced manufacturing. They need power basically yesterday. They need energy now, and right now they're finding the ability to get that energy in Pennsylvania and Ohio.
So we should have hydrofracking in New York in ways that we don't know?
Well, I would say that right now, the amount of reserves and supplies that exist in Pennsylvania natural gas is enough to supply our current needs for many decades, if not a century. There's more gas in Pennsylvania than we really know what to do with. New York has elected not to allow the gas into the state, which would benefit everybody in the state through lower energy prices.
Well, on that note, we've been speaking with Brian Welsch. He's a vice president at National Fuel. Brian, thanks for visiting us. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.